This is Cars and Bids, and we are coming up to the end of the year, so I'm going to make this video about the data, all of the data from Cars and Bids over the last year. We have run 1,287 auctions, probably a little bit more by the time you see this video, but we have a lot of data. What's the most popular body style, cylinders, country, drivetrain, manufacturer? We're gonna do it all here. We have a great data person. He pulled all this data and he showed it to me and I said, this would make a great video. I think people are very interested to see what percentages of everything have gone. 1,287 auctions, a pretty good amount of auctions. And so let's talk data on Cars and Bids. Okay, I'm gonna start with body style. What is the most common body style of car on Cars and Bids? The answer is coupe. Number one, our most common is coupe. 28% of the cars we run are coupes. Sedan is just behind coupe. 26.6% of our cars are sedans. And then behind that, just barely, is convertible at 20%. So an enormous portion of the cars, 74% of the cars we run are either sedans, coupes, or convertibles. Crossovers have not come to extinguish cars on Cars and Bids just yet. The least common body style we have is van. Only 9 vans have been auctioned so far, less than 1% of the total. Okay, next up, country of origin for the cars. The most popular country, if you follow along on Cars and Bids, this won't surprise you at all, Germany. Germany accounts for 49% of the cars we sell on Cars and Bids are German cars. But the next two are not small either. Japanese cars are 21%, give or take, and American cars are about 16.5%. So those three countries, that's like the lion's share, the vast majority. Just those three countries, American, Japanese, German, make up 87% of the cars we sell on Cars and Bids. Obviously, because that's where large manufacturing industries, a lot of enthusiast cars, that's really not all that big of a surprise, but it's interesting to see that data. 87% of the enthusiast cars, 1,300 auctions, have been German, Japanese, or American. As far as the lowest number of countries, we've had only one French car sell. That was a Peugeot 205 GTI, fantastic car. And we had one Yugoslavian car sell, which was of course a Yugo that sold for relatively big money, and it was a cool car. Okay, next up, cylinders. Here are the data on cylinders. What do you think the most popular number of cylinders that a car has that sells on Cars and Bids? The answer is 8. V8s account for 37.4% of our sales. Almost 500 auctions of V8 cars so far. 6-cylinder is next at 32%, so it's not really all that far behind. And then 4-cylinder is next at 22%. Those three cylinder counts combine for just over 91% of auctions on Cars and Bids. 91% of the cars that we sell are either V8, 6-cylinder, 4-cylinder. Again, not really all that surprising. That's the bulk of cars, generally, but it is interesting to see the numbers. V12 cars, haven't had that many, just under 4% of our cars are V12s. Interestingly, no cylinders is 23 cars, 1.8%. That actually beats out 10 cylinders, which is 16 cars, 1.2%. I guess no cylinders must be EVs, maybe if we've RX-8s, rotaries. But we've sold more cars with no cylinders than with 10 cylinders. Interesting little thing. But V8s, 6 cylinders, and 4 cylinders over 90%. Not really surprising, but that's the cylinder counts. Okay, next up, drivetrain. There are 3 options: front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, or all-wheel drive. Not surprisingly, rear-wheel drive is the biggest by far. Of all of our auctions, 61% of cars that have been auctioned have been rear-wheel drive. All-wheel drive is next, 28% have been all-wheel drive, so that's about 90% right there, rear or all. Front-wheel drive cars, not common on Cars and Bids. Only 10% of our auctions have been with front-wheel drive cars, so rear is really our big seller, and then all-wheel drive is next. It would be interesting to develop a car based on this metric. You'd have a rear-wheel drive V8 from Germany, and it'd be a coupe. This is sounding like the E92 M3. And speaking of that, let's talk transmission. Obviously only 2 options here, automatic or manual. You can choose. Automatics have accounted for 54.7% of our listings. So more than half of our listings have automatic transmissions. That's 704 cars. Manuals are close, 45%, obviously the rest. But autos are a little bit higher than manuals. We've auctioned more automatics than manuals, which is interesting. Right about 50-50, but automatics do have a slight edge. Okay, next up is year. I find this to be kind of fascinating. What is the most common year of a car that we've sold on Cars and Bids? The answer is 2006. That's our most common year. We've sold 63 cars from '06. Next up is 2000 at 57, then '03 at 56, then '02 at 54. One interesting thing, of our 10 most popular years, 9 of them are from 2000 to 2009. So that 10-year stretch in the 2000s, basically, 9 of those 10 years are represented as our top 10 most popular years. So basically the 2000s is where we're most popular. The only exception, the only year of the 2000s that isn't in our top 10 is 2009, which is 27th. And I think that's interesting. That's a reflection of the economic crisis in '08, because car production declines significantly, sales were way down, people weren't buying cars, automakers had massive layoffs, factories were closed, so '09 model cars are just not really all that common. And so 2009 is 27th on our list, even though every other year of the 2000s is in the top 10, but '09 just not all that common of a year for vehicles. And obviously that will hold true forever. There's just not going to be that many '09s. It just wasn't a common year for cars to exist because of the recession. Okay, next up, here's a very interesting statistic. Make. What is our most common manufacturer on Cars and Bids? The answer is BMW. 252 of our 1287 auctions have been BMWs. Almost 20% of the cars we've sold have been BMWs. Next is Mercedes-Benz, 188 auctions, so 15% give or take. And then next is Porsche at around 8.4%. If you add up those three, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Porsche, you get 43%. So over 40% of our auctions are just those three brands, Mercedes, BMW, and Porsche. They've all been very successful on Cars and Bids. They've all gotten a lot of traffic, a lot of bids, a lot of sales, and people who own those cars are obviously seeing that, and then they're selling their cars, and then that leads to more and more and more, and so that's why we've done so well. The next highest brand, so BMW is 20%, Mercedes 14.6%, Porsche is 8.4%. The next highest is Ford at only 5.2%. The brands really start to level off after that. Toyota 4.9%, Audi 4.7%, but those three, BMW, Mercedes, Porsche, has been our biggest success obviously so far. Now, in that same vein, let's talk model. The most common model listed on Cars and Bids is M3. 42 M3s have sold so far, representing 3.3% of the total in just M3s. Next is 911. Porsche 911s have been huge. We've done very well with them. They've gotten good numbers. We've had 35 911s on the site in over 1,287 auctions. Next is M5, then Miata, then Mustang, then Corvette, then SL500, then Land Cruiser, then S4, then S2000. No surprises at all here. If you've been paying attention at all, you'll see we almost always have at least 5 of these 8 or 9 cars running at any given time. Mustangs, Corvettes, Land Cruisers, S2000s are all very popular here, and M3s, 911s, and M5s being the top. That's no surprise to anybody. And finally, the seller type. So we have 2 types of sellers that can sell their cars on Cars and Bids, private sellers or dealerships. And so far, almost 80% of our sellers have been private sellers and about 20% have been dealers, which I find to be interesting. I think a lot of private sellers have watched my videos and are fans or whatever, and they want to sell their cars with us. And they've learned quickly that Cars and Bids is the place to sell these 80s and up cars. And we're getting great money, we're getting the most interest, and so people who are selling their cars, this is the place that they want to do it. And so we've been a huge hit with private sellers, which I love. I also love dealers, I work with them a lot. So 80% private sellers, 20% dealers, an interesting statistic. And with that in mind, you should sell your car on Cars and Bids. If you have some interesting, cool, enthusiast car from the 80s and up, Cars and Bids is the place to sell it, of course. And those are the Cars and Bids statistics from 2020, from our first 1287 auctions. I will see you in many other videos, but also next year I think I should do another one of these because it's very interesting to see some of these trends, and we'll see if things are the same next year or different or what's changing. So that's Cars and Bids statistics. Thanks for watching.